Good afternoon. My name is Robert Dijkgraaf. I'm the director here at the Institute for Advanced Study, and I want to welcome you with this kind of wonderful collusion of two stars, two maestros, I would say. There is a collision, collision. Who are here, I think, both for, by the way, for a sad and a happy reason. Of course, tomorrow we're celebrating the life of Irving Levin, and Frank here will be speaking at that occasion. And I'm sure Irving would have loved to this conversation. And Gustavo, you're here this week in part of your residency at Princeton University. So it's wonderful that we have the two of you together now. Indeed, astronomers are able to measure recently these collisions of superstars, and then they worry whether they will turn into one big black hole. I hope that doesn't happen here. Also, I feel a little bit awkward giving any introductory remarks. I just said, you know, if you're performing, then you just start as a symphony. There are no introductions, but just say a few words for those of us. Just, you know, and I could easily fill an hour just by reading your CV and all the great achievements. Of course, Frank Gehry is one of the most celebrated architects of the 20th century. For many works, including, of course, the Walt Disney Concert Hall, which is one of the linking pins, but also the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao. Here in Princeton, the Lewis Library. Gustavo Dudamel is one of the most distinguished conductors of our times. He is the music and artist director both of the Los Angeles Philharmonic and of the Orquesta Sinfónica Simón Bolívar in Venezuela. Well, since the construction in 2003, the Walt Disney Concert Hall served as the home for the Los Angeles Phil and praised both in design and acoustics. And it has been praised as one of the most important architectural landmarks. I would say similarly, Gustavo has been praised all over the world in the way he's kind of energizing classical music and showing its future, which is, I think, just an absolutely wonderful thing. There's a long history of collaboration between our two stars here. They've been encircling each other for a long time, including the 2012 production of Mozart's Don Giovanni at Disney Hall. In 2013, Frank was hired to envision a new facility to locate it in Gustavo's hometown, and that would include a concert hall, rehearsal studios, and educational space. And I think that's still a work in progress. Also in 2013, Frank Gehry's design for the Judith and Thomas Beckman Youth Orchestra Los Angeles Center at Inglewood was unveiled, and that facility is dedicated to the training of young musicians in underserved community. And according to the LA Times, it will become an unmistakable Gehry building with an openness that invites experimentation. For Dudamel, this is the key. So it's
That's not true.
It's not true. I see.
It's an existing bank building. And I just intervened a little and made it higher so that it could...
Fake news. Anyhow, I think we are extremely blessed to have both of you here. And with an impromptu discussion form.
Very.
Which is, I think, in the best tradition of art. So you will have a conversation with two of you, but at some point I think we also want to involve you as audience here. And I must say also want to thank Arnie Levine here, because you have been instrumental in making this all happen. And so the floor is yours.
So coming here has been a blessing in my life for some years. And it all happened because of the Irving Levin, who we're going to honor tomorrow. But it's a venue that's open to anything goes. And when I heard Gustavo was going to be here, I figured that's how we are together. Anything goes. We drink a little tequila sometimes.
With ice.
With ice, yeah. Not drunkards, but...
Sometimes.
But since he came to LA, to the concert hall, I've experienced a whole different world of the concert hall than it was with the previous conductor. It's not to make any judgment better or different, and I was sort of interested in that difference. I know different people do different things, but how do you think of the space, of a new space, when you do, like the one? It took you a while to get used to it, right?
Yes and no.
No, probably no. See?
Yes and no, because I think for us it's a luxury to have a place like Disney Hall, that is our instrument. And I think when you have a place, it's like an instrument. It's exactly like an instrument. When you have the chance, a violin player have the chance to play an Stradivari or a Guarneri, the sound that you produce is wonderful, but also it inspires you also to play better, and that happens with Disney, and I think you can feel that interaction between what is happening on the stage and the audience. I think that is one of the things that makes more special Disney Hall. How close the audience is to the stage. You feel like part of the action when you are listening to a concert, and when you are on the stage, you feel the people embracing.
That was very on purpose.
Exactly, and that is great. So, and tequila and ice, and some good food.
But when you came, since you've been there, the string section has changed completely.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, but it's a process. I think it's about, of course, it's a point of view of things. That is the beautiful thing of music, or art in generally. Is that every interpretation is a truth. It's not a radical thing that says this has to be done in this way. And having an orchestra as is the Los Angeles Philharmonic, it have changed a lot also, right, with new members and all of that.
But you directed that, and
yeah,
so it's your orchestra.
It have been a process, and it's beautiful to see that develop. It takes time, It's like when you go to the gym. And you go one day and you feel so good, and you think that your body is muscular already and everything. No, it takes time to show that the muscles are there, and that process have paid during these 10 years that I have been music director. And I want to also ask you, because this is something that, as I'm telling, the creative process have I think it's not an improvisation. I think when I see Disney Hall, it's very rhapsodic. Mm-hmm. I don't feel like it's a symphony. If not, it's like a rhapsody of the spaces. Every single corner, every single space give you a different feeling. It's like to have different melodies together. So in that process of creativity, how important was the contemplation of the space, for example, or the tempo that you have. For me, it's fascinating to see every corner, and every day, even after 10 years, I discover a different room, a different feeling of the room. So it's incredible, the harmony and how can be interpreted, right, your creation.
Yeah, I'm interested in how you think about that. But I had a good teacher, right? Ernest Fleischman, who was director of the Phil. And he and I, when we were appointed as the architects, he and I traveled together and visited halls and met with acousticians and talked to musicians, and we went all over the place. At that time, the Berlin Philharmonie was the newest, and that was designed for von Karajan, and the acoustician was Dr. Kramer. And we had already pre-selected Dr. Nagata for our acoustician. And so we met in Berlin at Kempinski restaurant and talked about what the hall should look like. Nagata said Kramer was his great teacher, and Kramer said that Nagata was his best student. So I said, okay, guys, what shape should I make the hall? So Kramer did this, which is the shape of Berlin by Sharon, and the orchestra's here. So it's very wide, and it's one of the flaws in that design, right? It's wide, but I didn't know. And then Dr. Nagata said this, which is the orchestra here. And so I said, well, you love him and he loves you. Tell me which one. And luckily from that trip, we went to Amsterdam and went to the Concertgebouw. And for some reason, both Ernest and I felt that was the right. It wasn't perfect, but there was something about the feeling of the Concertgebouw, because it wasn't a shoebox, it was wider, so it felt friendlier than Boston Symphony Hall. The orchestra had a problem in Concertgebouw, but we could fix that. Yeah. So that became our idea. So we spent a lot of time on these kind of things, and I think Ernest taught me a lot about, I'm not a musician, can't read music, nothing, you know.
You're a great musician.
I know. So I think it was feeling my way through, but I was very interested in the feeling of people together in a room, because I'm used to giving talks in auditoriums and places, and sometimes they don't feel good, sometimes they do. And the reason they do and the reason they don't becomes pretty apparent. And so the idea of a room where to listen to music where people could feel connected to the orchestra and to each other, I thought was what I could bring to the table. And so that was a big thing. And we had to argue because it created problems with the seating, because it meant that the seats had to be closer, so we couldn't do continental seating where you could get in and out, and so that was a problem for some of the people that came to the hall. But in the end, I think it does work, and the members of the orchestra have told me many times they feel part of the audience, and vice versa. I think it's a big deal.
And one thing that even, you know, if of course you have an acoustician, when you are creating, you have a sense of the sound without having, you know, maybe the advice of the acoustician, you know, thinking the shape of the place.
I think I do now more than, yeah, I do somehow. I don't know how to explain it, but I think I do.
Because that is very interesting, because I think we play a lot with the acoustic of the place, with the risers of the orchestra, you know, how we place the orchestra. But the shape of the place is always the same. So it's like an Stradivari. Again, we go back to the example of a violin. You can change the strings, but the instrument is always the same. You know, it can be more brilliant, the sound of all of that. But I think Stradivarius have, you know, an idea of the sound, you know,
right,
when he was building. That is an interesting process, because I have seen you, I know Josu, the acoustician, and it's very interesting to see that. For me, it's very interesting to understand that process, because I think in that process of creativity, you have an idea. No?
Yeah, when I first won the competition, the first violinist at the LA Phil.
Martin.
No, it wasn't Martin. It was way back.
Oh my God. Okay. That one.
Yeah, that one. Said to me, Mr. Gehry, we don't really need an architect. We really need somebody with a good measuring stick. He said, you have to go to Boston, measure Symphony Hall, and rebuild it. So I knew that this guy in his hobby was making copies of Stradivari.
Oh, of course.
So I asked him about copying the Stradivarius. Was it the same as a real one? But I did it publicly, so I embarrassed him.
But that is interesting, because I was few weeks in Boston at the concert hall and it's beautiful. You know, it's a beautiful sound, and then you go.
The people thing is.
Huh?
The people thing is not the same.
No, but it works. You know, it depends. You have to work a lot, to make a balance, because that is our responsibility also. We cannot let only the acoustic to do the magic. You need to push the orchestra also to play what is in the music, but sometimes that is very subjective, because you have a forte, but if you have a solo in the flutes that is forte, and you have also the strings playing forte, you have to put the strings playing less, and that is a job that we need to do. But it's something in the sound of the halls. It's something in the space, in the feeling. It's something physical that makes you think in that sound. I cannot work in the same way, even with the same orchestra, in another place. But what we do is we bring our sound that we have built on the stage of Disney Hall. So, what do you think about that? Because you see the change, you can see the process.
I was going to ask you about that, because you make a decision in situ while you're conducting. Immediate, it's a immediate thing. You're doing it while it's happening.
Yeah.
And so it's got to be a way of thinking that's very natural, because you play all the music from memory. So you got all the music from memory, you got the orchestra, you got this goddamn room, and then you got to adjust as you go on the fly, and it's sort of exciting, but
of course it's because the space where we work in is very subjective also. I have a lot of arguments with my assistants when they are listening outside and I'm conducting on the stage, and then I go and they say, no, you have to play less this and more there, and then you go there and you say, like, no. It's about a personal view sometimes, most of the time. But one thing in Disney that is the balance. And it's something also interesting in the plays, that even if we keep the structure exactly in the same way, with the time it changes. Yeah. And it's not about the orchestra, it's about the plays. It's like the Stradivari, a new instrument doesn't sound in the same way as with the time works. You think also in that way, when you build a hall, especially a hall, a concert hall. No?
I don't know. I mean, it's you're building with materials you select at that time for that purpose. They do age. Visually they age, so maybe
but it affects.
I'm asked the scientist, where are you? It does change the sound, I think. Yes, yeah.
That's interesting
It must,
to see.
it inevitably must, yeah.
It's interesting to see that because for us, the place is our instrument.
Yeah, so you got a lot of leeway, though, in your mind, how to do it. But some conductors don't.
No.
And they come and do it. So it's very different, and you hear it.
Yeah. I remember conducting the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra. And we had a tour. And I remember we were playing in a horse gallery, in Vienna. The orchestra plays the horse ride Schule, something like that is the name. Which is the name, Misha? It's like the Spanish ride.
Yeah, I know that.
It's a beautiful place. And the funny thing is that the first concerts were done in that place. And the music Verein was inspired by that place. But it's still, is saint, it's a lot of horse, the delicious smell of horses and all of that. And we were playing Beethoven Fifth. And I remember a member coming and said, because I was trying to balance in a good way as the concert hall. And he told me, you know what? Let's don't change so many things, because if not, we will change our personality. And then I was like, well, 50% he's right, 50% I'm right, but I will give 100% to what he said. And it's true, because sometimes acoustically we try to, it's like you are so beautiful already, but then you try to, to make up or to do more, and then you get horrible, or you get or not horrible, or you get who are you? It's you? And it's exactly the same thing. I think we bring the sound of the orchestra, but also we travel with the sound of our space,
So if you go to Carnegie, it's a different thing, though.
Yeah, completely. It's a beautiful acoustic, of course, a part of the ambulances and the trains that pass through, it's almost impossible to play a pianissimo.
Well, Maniac says he's playing and the subway goes through and he just plays along with it.
Yes, exactly. But, and you feel, of course, I have this question for you. You were studying all of these places. They are completely different. But acoustically, we are trying to arrive, our goal, I think, is to arrive to specifically a good acoustic. We can say, the Concertgebouw, for example, on the stage is very difficult to play, but the sound outside, it works.
Fantastic.
It works magically.
Right.
You go to the Berlin Philharmonic, even they were dealing with acoustic problems, they renew the hall in the 80s or the 90s. And you go to the Music Verein, and it makes a sound. What is your goal in the sound? Because I'm sure you say that you are not a musician, but you are, because you appreciate, that dimension of an interpretation, but also the sound that is there. So what is your vision? Because in that sense,
It starts with the people. That's it. Make it a place where people interact, where they can enjoy the music, and that the room feels good to be in, that you feel communication. It's simple. Shakespeare said, "All the world's a stage," right? Mm. And it is. We're all part of the act. The people in the audience are part of the act. You've said that. You've just been talking about that.
Yeah.
So I think you make a space, but it's in different places, in different conditions. You think differently. The one in Berlin for Barenboim was in a small existing room. He had no program. It's for the Divan Orchestra with Palestinians, Israelis, and everybody playing together. And I drew an oval, just intuitively, and then I thought, that doesn't work. And then I started designing a very more conventional kind of audience thing, just to see what it looked like, not that I was going to do it. And I was searching for something. And Daniel saw the more conventional. He said, stop it, I love the oval, you must do the oval. So he didn't know why, and we did the oval, and the goddamn oval works better than anything, so it's people allowing themselves the freedom to think on the fly and to relate to each other and trust. I trust he knows more about music than I do, and I know more about architecture, so we found each other and did it. And the same thing for us working in Barquisimeto. Working together, the politics made us stop, but we're going to work on it.
Yeah.
And we will find a communal thing. We'll talk to each other somehow, miraculously through something like we're doing now.
Yeah.
Like we're trying to do. It's, I think, transferring feelings, transferring ideas from different disciplines is exciting and interesting. If everybody's open and there's a common sort of goal, I think you can.
How is that feeling of it's like a premiere? I believe that composers in the creative process, they have an idea of what they are writing, but then when they arrive to the place where the orchestra is, it changed completely.
Yeah, I have that.
Yeah, that is what I wanted to ask, and I imagine in that process, thinking about Beethoven, that is for me the greatest. I thinking about his situation, his condition, writing this amazing music at the end of his life, writing these quartets without, not having the possibility to listen to. How that in the creative process of not having the ability, or not the ability, the possibility to predict something.
Yeah.
In the process of creativity, how you?
It's the same in architecture. Yeah, you have the ideas evolve, and you have a dream of idea, a dream image, and you try to. But I've got to work through several thousand people that are going to make it, with lots of different opinions, lots of different priorities, and holding the line. It's like in the West when they get on a cow or a bull that's jumping. That's how I feel sometimes. That you don't know where it's going to end up, but you hang on and you take it through. I think it's not the sound of one hand clapping, though, because I've got you or your counterpart in. I had Daniel, I had Esa-Pekka. And with Esa-Pekka, we spent a lot of time. We took the orchestra to Royce Hall, took it out of the Chandler, and set them up differently. And I asked Esa-Pekka to arrange the orchestra ideally for himself, which was much different than the way they were sitting in the Chandler. And so we measured those, the new seating. It was it looked even more beautiful. And we built those risers in the Chandler. And at that time, the music critic of the LA Phil hated Ernest Fleischman and the orchestra, so he never said anything good. We set this up, and he said, I don't know what happened, but it sounds so much better. So
It was the same orchestra.
same orchestra. It's just that, and we found out it's just normal. What happened is members of the orchestra knew the stagehands, and they didn't like the guy or the gal sitting next to them, so they asked the stagehand to move their chair a little bit this way. And it happened throughout the orchestra. You know, some of them were more aggressive, and so it was a mess visually.
Yeah, I
And
know
it
that.
was that happens, and you know that happens.
Yeah, it can happen.
So there's a lot of serendipity in this soup. And then the programming, like Disney Hall, we originally had it designed with an orchestra pit so they could do chamber opera.
The space is there.
And then space is there, and that was value engineered out. So then when Gustavo wanted to do the Mozart operas, we had to improvise. So I put the orchestra up on top of a platform and put the actors down on the stage so they'd be more, and he had to conduct by television.
Yes. It was by the monitors.
It didn't work very well, but we tried things. We keep trying things, but I think we got to build an orchestra pit someday.
We will, for sure. Simon.
Raise the money, Simon.
Well,
A lot of this stuff happens on the way to.
if we have questions,
Perhaps a good time to ask
Yes.
questions from the audience. So, who's first? Yes, please.
You don't have nothing.
I have a question for Maestro Dudamel about the creative process. So obviously in classical music, most of the, a significant portion of the work is being done by the composer, and you're standing there both as an interpreter and as a communicator. But how do you view your own role in the creative process of making the music?
well, we recreate something that is created already. That is I think, our action in music. And it's a very interesting process because even if you develop an interpretation, studying the score, when you arrive to the orchestra for the first rehearsal and to make a concert, things can change completely. And that is fascinating for me. That process of studying, but also at the same time making an interpretation of what I understand or what I receive from that notes that I'm studying is very flexible all the time. And it always can change even from performance to performance. Even if the center of the idea is there, it have a flexibility all the time. We were just talking about time, and the feeling of time in music. You know, we really perceive time because we cannot stop. You know, we have and I love that. That makes me very open in my process to study. You know, that is what I tell to the young conductors, because sometimes we arrive with many ideas and with thousands of things, and we want to rehearse this in this way, and then suddenly the orchestra plays perfectly, and you are stuck. And what do I do now? Or the orchestra doesn't respond of what you have. So there is a space of trust. There is also in that process of recreation, of creativity, that is the space also where you are. Because maybe now that this tragedy happens in Paris with Notre Dame, I did there the Berlioz Requiem, where, you know, the acoustic is crazy. You know, I think the sound have a resonance of, I don't know, maybe 10 seconds. You know, it's huge. You know, we were finishing and then we have to wait 10 seconds for the sound to stop. And, you know, to add in the Dies Irae, the second number, you have, I think, I don't remember, I think you have 3 or 4 orchestras outside, brass. So we were in the center of the cathedral, but we have an orchestra in the balcony back, in the balcony in the front of the building, another here. So Berlioz asked you to be faster and faster and faster. You cannot imagine how difficult was that. Because even if they were having the monitor following me, what they were listening was in another time. It's like Kip Thorne, in the conversation that we have, he said that the pictures that he took of the collision of the galaxies in 2015, this happened, you know, 3 billion years ago. So it's exactly the same thing. Where they are playing there, they are receiving, you know, in the past, you know, the dimension of time is amazing with the acoustics. So I had to slow down everything, where I was thinking to play a super accelerando and to make that scary and collapse. Yes, it collapsed, but very slow, you know. So that process, it changed a lot. It has a space of flexibility.
Happy to hear you applying Einstein's theory to your composing.
Yes.
But composers compose for certain, like Berlioz, I've been told, composed Troyen for a small opera house in Switzerland, probably in Zurich, the small place. And every time they perform Troyen, it's huge,
yeah.
especially at the Met.
Yeah, no, but in this case, he was very opulent. The score asked for choir at least 200. You know, he's very specific. 10 timpani players. 10 timpani players. Imagine 10
So
timpanis.
why did he
So it was not concert in Paris with percussion that week, because we rent all the percussion sets in the city to have all the instruments there. You know, it requires that magnanimous, you know, way to and it's amazing because I believe it's very theatrical. It's ultra theatrical. I wish I have the ability to compose, to really create, you know, something. But I'm at the service of the genius of the composer.
So Pierre Boulez composed Sur un Six, oh no, Répond.
Oh, yes.
For a basketball court in L.A.
These scores are like this.
Yeah, and so we designed a small hall in Berlin, and it named it after him. And just before he died, I asked him. I said, "Répond was designed for a large space. Could you imagine it played in this small 700-seat hall?" And he gave me a big smile. But if you remember, he's the guy that went to New York Philharmonic and moved the orchestra forward and put the rugs on the stage. he changed the hall when he conducted. So
Okay.
you can change things.
Okay.
There's precedence. You have permission. And that was the most beautiful. I attended those concerts. They were incredible.
It was at the Fisher Hall? Or-
Yeah, that's all they have to do. They don't have to mess with all the shit they're doing now. They just move.
He moved the orchestra.
Just
He
do
replaced.
what Pierre said, and they'll be fine.
Wonderful.
Another question. Marilyn, do you want to ask her?
Frank, you have done museums
Yep.
and you've done concert halls. Museums are for sight and concert halls are for hearing. Do you shift your ground? Do you think in terms of static art as opposed to what Dudamel is describing as a freight train of movement, of change? And where does the composer come into your conceptualization?
It's the same in terms of the artist and the composer, right? The artist has to go to a museum, and the convention that we are living with, for the most part, is art is best in a white box on a white wall. Ta-da. That's what you're given in most of the museums, and the artists don't like that. I've talked to many of them. They want to be in spaces. They want to. So when we did Bilbao, we designed the white box galleries for the dead artists who couldn't defend themselves. And a lot of the galleries are freer, and the artists loved it. They came and messed with it and tried it and do things. I think music could be the same. There's certain acoustic requirements that force you to certain dimensions, but I think you can play. We're trying to. A lot of people are moving musicians around in different parts of the room, and we're trying to. You would like to do that, and I know that Esa-Pekka has tried that, and we have Peter Sellers in LA who comes in and moves things around anyway, and I think there's a lot of similar issues. As long in music, you have this acoustical line you got to pay attention to. But in art, I think you can go all over the place. You can have more freedom. And the artist, it inspires the artist, and they want to be in places that are more exciting.
Gustavo, do you feel sometimes constrained by the box, so to say, in terms of the spaces in which you have to work?
No.
You think there's something there more to explore?
Yes, and I think there is always flexibility to change, you know, even if you are in a very, how to say, claustrophobic place. As we were today at the elevator, and we were trying to think if we fit there. So we are all the time in that situation. When you play, for example, in the Musikverein, it's really interesting in Vienna, because
It's a straight line.
Exactly, it's like that, but the stage is very narrow. It's long, but very narrow, and then the cellos and some of the violas, they sit on the floor. They have chairs that are on the floor, so they are used really to play very, very together. You know, that is the difference in general with, for example, American orchestras, where the space is part of the rule. So I think.
But before Scharoun's Berlin Hall, Musikverein was always spoken about as the most important.
Mm-hmm.
Musikverein and then Boston. But and Musikverein now is kind of quaint.
Yeah.
There's a question over there. Yes, can you wait for the mic? Just wait for the mic for a moment.
Over the course of your career, what technological development has been the most useful for you? And if you could wish into existence tomorrow some technological tool, what would you wish for?
Oh my God. Well, I did a bit, this is a long story, I'll try to shorten it, but I did a building in Switzerland and I had a curve and I designed it using, what do you call it? The descriptive geometry that I was taught. It was built and it had a kink in it. And the contractor proved to me that he followed my plans and it led to the kink. So that led me to Dassault Systems, the French guys who are making airplanes with a software called CATIA. And we started using that. It's very expensive and most architects couldn't afford it, and we couldn't either, but we did use it and it opened Pandora's box. Once you got there, you could define all these things. So Bilbao was built with that, and it was under budget. All those curves, the city and the client looked at it and said, "You'll never be on budget." We did it because you could define everything with that technology. It would make it so much easier. You could get approvals through the building department for the most complicated building if that software was used by the people who evaluate and the people who make. And there's something in the system that's the construction industry that's preventing that from going full blown. So we sold that part of our effort out. We use it, but so now there's three, the Oculus and the HoloLens, and I forget. And those scare me. When I put them on, I get sick. Virtual reality, right. I think there's something there, and it's going to make it easier to communicate to the construction people and the engineers and to see what you're getting. I use a lot of models, to visualize, and I don't. It's too late for me. I don't think I could go into that stuff.
Gustavo, do you just want to ruminate perhaps a little bit on the role of, just in general, science, the way the world is changing, what it does to classical music? Because I know you're very passionate about bringing it into the future, but the future will be a very different society. Right?
No, I think technology is very important. Used in the right way, that is the important thing. I have an interview one day in Vienna, and Vienna is a beautiful place, but it's ultra traditional. It's, my God, ultra traditional. And I remember in an interview I said, we have to deal with technology, because in few years we will have, orchestras, holograms in our house, playing for us. We will have live, the Vienna Philharmonic in Tokyo, live, like they are playing here, acoustically perfect. And a critic was like, "Oh my God, that is not possible. It's crazy." So, I think if the technology is like recordings, for example. We were talking yesterday at the conducting class about the access that we have right now with the technology. We can go and to Spotify, and where in few years ago was very difficult to find a recording, now you find hundreds of them. Before, I think it was very beautiful because you had to build an idea knowing the technique of a conductor, imagining that. Now you can see that, you know. You go to the internet and you push something and you can see, you know, Food Bangler conducting a rehearsal, you know, when 10, 15 years ago that was a luxury. I remember buying videos or CDs, you know. I have my house full of CDs, where now I travel with my mobile and I have whatever I want to search for, you know. I think it's useful, but at the same time I think we have to be careful because we need to have also the space, again, to create our own vision of things and not get so influenced by so many things that we listen to. So it's a balance there.
Further questions? Yes.
I mean, both of you touched on communicating with students, and what are your thoughts? Some advice for young people aspiring to, you know, the beginning or early in their career, and maybe how it relates to space and how it shapes us.
It's to me or to you? It's to
It's
both.
to both of us.
But I think...
Because I'm older.
No. You remember, you are my youngest brother. Tell, you start.
Well, I think first of all, students and the young generations are always the hope, you know, with all the mess in our world right now. You always think that there's hope in that, and I think Gustavo has the best example of that in Venezuela with Sistema, where with all the stuff that's going on there, Sistema is still going and still generating kids, and kids are generating more kids, and they're playing. You know, it's always the hope that the new generations, you guys will figure it out and make it better and do something. It's, you know, it's the same. The music, we all live listening to music. We all love looking at art mostly, and we're enlightened, and we're taught to do that. We read, we do all that stuff because we need to sustain ourselves. And I hope that the world of education will continue to nurture that. In California, there's a law requiring that all K through 8 schools have an arts education program. Guess what? It doesn't exist. The money's being used by the police. And so the ACLU is now filing suit on that. But so you have to watch. It's like you have to kind of keep your eyes and ears open of what's really going on and the values that are being promoted and listened to and what they create. And I was 8 or 9 years old when I used to listen to Hitler speeches, and I lived through what that all did, and some of you have too. And so it can go bad. So we got to be careful. And I think the best example I know of that is from his background. So tell him.
Yes, tell us.
Me?
Yes.
Okay. What I have to say? An advice?
Sistema.
Yes. Well, how for you, actually in practice, you have kind of showed that youth is the future and it is sustainable.
As Franz said, I'm a result of a program, you know, that gave me the opportunity to build what I am right now. So everything in my life has been very natural. I never have been pushed to do something. And even in the difficult times, you know, understanding, we were talking just about that also, about how crisis can be you know, good time for creativity, you know, to cross, you know, and to improve. And working as a team, for example, because I grew up working as a team. Of course, it was education as an individual artist, but the work was always as a team, and the result, we were proud as a team. So that was very, very beautiful, you know, and it's very beautiful in El Sistema, and that is what happened. Advice, my God, look, to know your place, you know, sometimes when we think we know something, we get to a position that is not healthy for the results of what you want to have. For example, when you are a young conductor, to get respect, you try to impose or to show that you know more. And it's not about that, especially conducting or interpreting something. You have to know that you are, again, at the service of the composer. Even you are at the service of the musicians that are in front of you. And that is something that for me is very important to pass to the new generations, because I have seen many young talent crash in the way because arrogancy, to put yourself on the top of the genius of the composers or the talents of the musicians that you have in front. You know, you have to be very careful with that. You have to go for all you can. That is for sure something that is very important. You know, demanding with respect, and we put our own limits. You know, sometimes we don't know that we have the ability to do some things, and you have to discover that. But it takes time. For some, now with the amount of information that we have, we sometimes we get scared, you know, because we want to be like, or yes, it can be as fast as like that, you know. Some people see myself, for example, I won the competition in Bamberg when I was 23 years old, and it was like, wow. So it was like magic that I arrived to that place. It was not like that. I started when I was 11, and I crossed thousands of things, you know, until I arrived there. Things are not easy, but you have to enjoy the path. You know, whatever take is easy to say, but whatever brings life to you, put that there, and you multiply that desire to do the things that you do. I think that is
Wonderful. I would say that's perhaps a great point to end the conversation. I mean, thank you both for sharing your insight, but also wonderful to see your own friendship and intense collaboration on stage. Thank you so much.
Thank you.